Hello, lolly people. I hope you're doing okay because I am. So this is going to be the video that a lot of people were waiting for. At least me myself personally, I was waiting for it. We will be measuring distortion of all of these speakers. Huge shout out to Frank from HEPA King for supplying all these lovely Alpine speakers for me for testing. And let's have a look at them. So I do apologize for the clickbaity title of Alpine distortion measurements. We will be measuring all of these drivers just to compare them in one video because like if you have measurements of a single driver or single series, they don't tell much because you need something for comparison. And my measurements are not lab grade, they're not perfect in any way. However, for comparison reasons, they're just perfectly fine. So we have here Alpine Status three-way set, 6.5, 3.5, and a big tweeter. We have Alpine DP series, 6.5, 3.5, and a small metal dome tweeter. And then for comparisons, I added these are the peerless drivers that I tested before. However, I add them just. It's not a fair comparison between a 4-inch and a 3.5, especially a home audio, but it's just why not? I have this one lovely thing. So this is a Fatal Pro 6FE100, which was borrowed to me by a buddy of mine just for testing purposes. And then I have two, I want to say, shitty speakers. So this one is a Boss 3.5. I paid literally like £5 for it, and it's a very old. It was in my dash for like 2 years, and this is, so it's just for you to see, and for me as well, how a really bad speaker is measuring. And this one, that's a tweeter from a coax set, so from Kicker CSC coax driver. I blew that driver by accident and I kept this tweeter just for testing purposes. So again, we're gonna have a look. It has like a passive crossover attached to it, so we just have a look at this one. So just a heads up, I did all the measurements last week and now I'm just gonna go through them. And let me very quickly show you how those measurements were actually done. So this is how I'm doing my testing. I have a test baffle there. Yeah, excuse the mess because it's supposed to be like that. I have a test baffle like this. The driver is mounted with the leads coming out. Now, I run a laptop, REW in the laptop. The output of the REW goes through the audio interface and through this cable goes through the home amplifier that feeds this speaker. And then the microphone goes into this one. So what I'm doing a bit slightly bit different than last time, I measuring near field. So I read about the method of distortion testing in Aaron's Audio Corner. Near field measurement of the microphone, and 1 meter away, I have my dB meter, dB reading. Yeah. And if I play a test tone through here, which is says check levels, if I press that, so at this point it's about 80 dB. So 1 meter away, 80 dB. Next to the microphone near field is 20 dB louder. So the maximum I'm going to be testing, I'm going to be testing 70, 80, and 90. And the microphone is going to be picking up 90, 100, and 110 dB. Now, the microphone is not going to clip because it can measure up to 135 dB, which is not a problem. The gain on the audio interface is all the way down, so I'm not clipping the input as well. Everything is fine. And basically, this is how I'm doing. So this driver is the smallest one, so it has the smallest cutout. And I will be testing all of these. Yeah, excuse the mess. I'll be testing, I have this one as well. So just for comparison to see how this is like £5 driver that I use for central channel. Boss. I don't know. And I'm going to test all of these drivers by making the cutout slightly bigger and bigger and bigger and just testing other drivers. So basically this is my test setup for distortion testing of these drivers. So I do have quite a lot of measurements. I have, how many of them I have? 50, more than 56, 57 measurements. We're not going to go through all of them because... Okay, so what did I do here? I have all these drivers that I mentioned before, and I tested them at 70 dB from listening position, at 80 dB, and at 90 dB. So 90 dB from listening position, near field it was 20 dB more, so 110 dB. So it's quite loud. I think we're going to focus on the 80 dB measurements because they don't change at all between these. It's just the level that is changing. So for example, on 80 dB, or is it? For example, on 80 dB, we have here, and the same driver on 90 dB is just higher, but it's the same thing. So we're going to focus on this. We will be checking, I think it would be useful to see just near field frequency response. Where is it? For example, this, just to see how it rolls off and the cone breakup. The distortion measurements, and as well what I did, I don't know how it's actually called. I think it's called intermodulation distortion. So when you play a single tone, for example, in this case, 200 hertz, you have the main fundamental tone, and then you have harmonics, which is like 200, 400, 600, every 200 hertz you have the harmonics. So I measured these at 200 hertz and I did exactly the same at 1K. And we will be comparing those harmonics between the drivers, because total THD, like here, it doesn't show everything, and we will be looking at that as well. So let's start, I guess, with just a regular frequency response measurements. Near field, and we're gonna start with the worst one. So 80, where is it? 80 dB. This one, the boss. So the boss, I used this driver for my central channel when I didn't have anything, when I was still running passive. It's like 5 years old, it's all beaten up and everything. And from this peak at like 140, you can see that it's a high Q driver because it has a peak there, so it's like probably 0.7, 0.8 Q, and it plays all the way up to 3K. Something here is happening, and here we have a cone breakup at 5.4, something like that, and then it just rolls off. So that's the boss. Then we have the DP series mid. So I did cross them at 80 hertz just for protection, and the DP plays again nice flat all the way up to 4K, and then at 5K there's a cone breakup here, and then it falls down. So if you would want to hide this cone breakup in the crossover region, you would have to cross at about like 2.5K just to have this down there below, or use like an EQ. So DP status mid looks like this. So the DP looks like it's playing much lower compared to the status. My guess, I didn't compare the FS of these two drivers, but I guess the FS is different, and probably the Q is different as well. So status 3.5 mid-range, it plays nice up to 3.5K, something like that. And the cone breakup is much higher at 9,000 hertz compared to the DP. There you go. Cone breakup is here instead of here, so you could potentially cross it higher. Again, this, I don't know if it's due to the phase plug, because when you do near field measurements, the phase plug affects those measurements as well. From far away, it would be different. I am planning to make a test enclosure, like a sealed box, and measure from a distance as well. Now the Peerless mid-range, the 4-inch, it's super flat, like between 100 and 3K. It's super flat. There's a dip, and this is the cone breakup. So compared to the status, the Peerless looks better, I want to say, but similar as well. Cone breakup in a similar way, similar point, and extension is similar, and here is a dip. So they measure similarly. Then we have Satori mid-range. Okay, so I did this. Yeah, I don't have the full measurement of this one for some reason. So I did measure the Satori. Again, it extends very nice. It has a little dip at 1.4K, which all the Satori drivers have due to the construction, whatever they have. And they play extremely flat all the way up to like 7.5, 8K, and then the cone breakup, and they extend even more. So the Satori, however, they're 5-inch drivers. So it's not really fair to compare, for example, the Status 3.5-inch. Actually, I chose the wrong one. This one, 3.5-inch, with a 5-inch driver. But yeah. So Satori, then you have the Fatal Pro, the 6.5-inch. So this one would be perfect for mid bass. However, here we have something happening here. I don't know what exactly, because there's no phase plug, but it is a dip there. And it plays all the way up. And here you have a cone breakup at 3.5K. So for mid bass duties in a 3-way, cross at about like 400, 500, this driver is perfect. Now the Ultra ST SB17, which is more flat, much flatter. Again, similar to the Satori, it has a dip at 1.2, and this driver plays all the way up to like 8K. Cone breakup probably is here, and it's not very pronounced. So for some drivers, it is very pronounced, like for the Fatal, it's here. And for the SB, it's much flatter, so it's perfect for a 2-way. Now, Peerless driver that I currently have in my car, I use it as a mid-bass driver. So they play, again, very flat, all the way up to 4.5. And there's a little cone breakup, and then it rolls down. Little dip at 1K, but very similar. Then the Alpine DP. So the DP, again, is similar to the Fatal. So Fatal Pro. So this one, it's almost the same. It's almost the same dip. The DP is light green, rise to the top, and then it goes down. The only difference is the cone breakup is managed a bit better. The Fatal Pro has a pronounced cone breakup, whereas the DP series doesn't have like a cone breakup. Maybe it's here. And these dips, I think it might be to do with like comb filtering due to the phase plug, but that's just a guess. And again, this driver is perfect for a 2-way when you cross it like 400-500 here, but in a 3-way, sorry, 3-way. But for a 2-way, it wouldn't be very nice. And the Status driver. So the Status, again, extremely flat, all the way up to 2K, apart from this little, not little, but like pronounced dip. And this dip, again, my suspicion is due to the phase plug being there. And if I compare it to the SB17, see, it's very similar. It has a higher FS, so it rolls off a bit faster. It doesn't play as low. This dip is in SB17 as well, but not as pronounced. But the Status has a very big dip, and the extension is very nice. And again, here it looks like comb filtering with no pronounced cone breakup, unless it's here. Okay, so this was the frequency response. Now let's have a look at the distortion. As I mentioned, we're going to take all the 80 dB measurements, starting from here. So this is the Boss, the shitty one, small one. I did play it down to 80 Hertz. And this is like what we have. We have about like, what, 3%? However, there's loads of third order harmonics, especially at bottom end and at the top end as well. And we will have a look at the other distortion measures that I have for this driver. You will understand why. So it is what it is. Now if compared to the DP series mid-range, 3.5, it's like this. So DP, the third harmonics, much lower. Again, this is the cone breakup, so it has more distortion, but it's like 2% all the way up to 2.5% here. And 2.5% is down to like 300, 250. And after that, it slightly rises. So if you would cross it at about 200 Hertz or something like that, this would go up and it would be equal. So it's not that bad, but you wouldn't want to play them all the way down to 100. because the third order harmonics here is having a sharp rise. So probably we need to cross them at about 200, something like that. And it's not that bad. Like in the upper mid-range, between 500 is less than 2%, like 1.5% here. So yeah, like that. Now let's have a look at the status mid-range. And if you flip between these two, so this breakup on the DP is at 5K. For the status, that breakup is at what, 10K? And it plays down to like 500 with 2%, but it's very similar. And it has a slightly sharper rise in the distortion. So I would assume they would have to be crossed slightly higher compared to the DP. And you can tell on the suspension as well, like the DP series has a bit softer suspension and maybe more X max compared to the status. But in general, like the third harmonics, even on DP, third harmonics is here like 0.2, and on status, they're all down there buried. So these are the mid-ranges. Now, for comparison, I added the Peerless driver, the one that I did before. So the Peerless has slightly large distortion. It does play low compared to the, for example, with the status. Status rises below 200 and up. Peerless plays all the way down to like 50, 60 hertz with lower distortion. The only differences are, like if you take the upper mid-range, like here, you have 2% from like 550 and up, whereas Peerless has slightly more distortion in that area, or 2.5%, like 0.5%. It's not that much. But Peerless, as I did the measurements before, has a third harmonic peak at 3K, whereas the status doesn't have that peak. Okay, but again, this is a home audio with very low FS. It's totally different driver, 4-inch. And this is a Satori one. So Satori 5-inch, yeah, it has a bit more distortion compared to the status. So this is a 3-inch status, which is, I'm gonna put it there. And Satori has slightly higher distortion. However, it plays way down low. It can play down to 60 hertz easy. However, the third harmonic rises very sharply. So again, probably down to 100. And 2.6, 3%. And this is the cone breakup that rises with the distortion. Satori. Now let's have a look at the mid-bass drivers. So 6.5-inch. This is a Fatal Pro. It's a very cheap driver. It costs like, I don't know, 30, 40 pounds, something like that. It's a very cheap driver. And again, as I mentioned, it should be used like in a 3-way just for mid-bass. And for this, we're going to kind of ignore the top end because we're not going to play them very high. And we're going to focusing on this area, like from the very bottom end all the way up to like 400-500 hertz. So here we have the highest 2% at about 250, and then it goes down to 1.6. And I'm going to leave this marker here like this. So 2% is something like this. SB17 has very similar distortion. However small. If you have a look at the third harmonic, again, third harmonic rises here for the Fatal Pro and at the bottom end as well. SB17, there's no third harmonic here, only at the bottom end. However, the distortion at the bottom end is higher, whereas in the mid-bass region is smaller compared to the Fatal Pro. Slightly smaller, yeah. But you can see here, if you take like 50 hertz, that's 2.8. On the Fatal is lower, like 2.2. So SB17s, they do play low, but they don't sound as good playing as low. Now the Peerless, the ones that I have in my car at the moment, they have much higher distortion at the bottom end, like 50 hertz. However, I chose them because they have less distortion here at about 100, 150 hertz, where they actually peak in the bandpass where I'm using them specifically compared to SB17s. There's a very slight, minute difference. So that's the only reason. And they have more cone area. That's why I chose them. That's why I have them. But in general, very nice, like 2% plus minus 0.5% all the way up to there. Third harmonic peaks here, and something is happening like at 5.5K. Now we have DP series mid bass. So DP, for some reason, it measures very low in harmonic distortion between like 60 and 80 hertz. So this is the lowest from all of these, see? Like if I have this marker here, SB17 higher, this higher, and this DP is much lower. However, the third harmonics are extortionate at 3K, at 700, and all the way down there. Compared to like SB17, this C, it's clean here. Only the THD, but DP it's a bit of a mess. So it's not as clean. It's not as clean. However, the total harmonic at this range is the lowest of all the drivers. Now the status mid-bass driver is like this. So it's like the harmonic distortion curve is extremely flat. So you have, well, 1.8, let's say 2%. Let's say 2%. A bit less than 2%, 1.8, 1.9. And you can see all the distortion is here all the way up to 2K. The slight peak in the third harmonic is 700. However, look at the bottom end. So let's take, for example, 30 hertz. 30 hertz distortion is 2.4%. DP has 3.7. Peerless has 10%. SB17 has 8%. Fatal Pro has 5%. So this is the lowest distortion at the bottom end of all the mid-bass drivers that I specifically have from all this bunch. So I'm surprised, like, I don't know, even if you play that at 50, down to 50 hertz, it's like 1.7%. And DP is slightly, kind of the same here at 50 hertz, but it rises up, whereas status is just super flat, the distortion. And all the other drivers, look how much more distortion it has at the bottom end. All of these drivers have much more distortion at the bottom end. So the status mid-bass, it's the cleanest from all that I have, especially this bottom end. And now I'm wondering, does this driver have a shorting ring? I have no idea because it's not mentioned anywhere. However, maybe the suspension, maybe the surround, the new surround has something to do with this. But this is very nice. So this is the distortion, the THD, the total harmonic distortion. Now let's have a look at this. I don't know how to call it. Intermodulation distortion, whatever. So for this one, I have to look at this. And I'm gonna reduce the scale to see a bit more. Okay, so this is the worst driver that I have, the Boss driver, the shitty one. So you play 200 hertz note. Actually, let's zoom in a tiny bit. Just like that. Okay. So you play 200 hertz note and you have all of these harmonics. And this is really bad because when you listen to this driver, when you play 200 hertz, you're hearing all of this and it buzzes and crackles. It's literally unlistenable. This driver is unlistenable. And that's why I mentioned you cannot really see on the THD measurement, but it shows perfectly on this. If I compare this with the Peerless 4-inch mid-range, you have this, you have 1, 2, 3, and that's it. And if I add this, so this is a very bad sounding driver. I have this. Now, DP series, the smaller one, is measuring like this. So it has a bit more stuff happening, slightly more here, and a peak here as well. So this, the Peerless 4-inch sounds better than the DP. I don't want to say sounds better, but it has less distortion here. And if I compare it to Status, look at this. This is cut in half. So the Status mid-range, if you compare to Peerless, it's cleaner. And if you compare to DP, again, this is the DP in blue. It measures much nicer. So the Status mid-range, again, measures the nicest from the mid-ranges that I have. That's 200 hertz. Let's have a look at 1K. I did exactly the same for 1K. So this is 1K for the boss driver, the one that sounds really, really bad. And you can tell it. All these harmonics, this sounds really bad. Now the Peerless, again, that's the difference. One peak here, 2, 3, and that's it, little blips here. The DP mid-range is similar, extremely similar to Peerless. If I remove this one, yeah, slightly smaller. See, especially this, like maybe 3 dB, slightly smaller compared to the Peerless. So it is cleaner at the top end. On the top end, the DP mid-range sounds a bit cleaner. And let's compare to the Status. Very similar, extremely similar. DP and the Status, extremely similar, but better than the Peerless, because Peerless has these peaks there. But yeah, so at the top end, the DP series Alpine and the Status measure similarly, but at the bottom end, at 200 hertz, Status mid-range takes over. Now let's have a look at the mid-bass drivers. So playing 200 hertz, Fatal Pro. That's a Fatal Pro. It has a peak at 1K as well, a little bit. SB17 measures very similarly. Maybe tiny bit smaller, but extremely similarly. Less, a bit less than 1K, but very similarly. DP, Alpine DP series. The DP series has less at 600 hertz and slightly more here above that, but smaller at 600 hertz. And the Status, for some reason, Status has nothing, almost nothing here, but much more at 600 hertz. If you compare to DP, and if you compare to SB17, so comparing to SB17 is slightly better because there's no dip here, but slightly more here. Yeah, so that's 200 hertz. Now let's have a look at 1K for the mid-bass drivers. It's Fatal Pro at 1K compared to SB17. So SB17 is lower. There's nothing here at 4K. Lower here, and this is, I don't know how should I align. Should I align the bottom end or the top end? Because I aligned the top end, so maybe I did it wrong. I don't know. But yeah, so SB17 probably cleaner than the Fatal at the top end. The DP series is not as clean as the SB17. Yeah, SB17 is cleaner at the top end a little bit. So I'm going to leave this and I'm going to untick this. And this is the Status mid-bass. Yeah, and look at that. So Status, the second harmonic is cut in half almost. However, Status has something at 5K, a little bit. However, this Status mid-bass driver is supposed to be used in a 3-way anyway. So it's just for fun that I'm testing it at 1K. But yeah, so all of this. And now if I summarize, what would be the conclusion for all of this? From all these measurements that I did, I can say that from the drivers that I have, so as I mentioned, I have the Fatal Pro, I have the SB17, I have the Peerless, and 2 of the Alpines. If I take the mid-range, from all the mid-ranges, the Peerless has the nicest frequency response. like near field, or is it peerless? Yeah. So it has the nicest frequency response from all the drivers. But if I take the distortion, the lowest, ooh, I need to take the higher one, the 80 dB. The lowest distortion probably would be the Satori, I want to say. But again, it's a 5-inch driver, so it's not really fair to compare a 5-inch driver with a 3.5-inch. So I want to say the DP mid-range is slightly better if you don't play it that high because of this. But if you take into account the third harmonic distortion, the status is the cleanest. And we can see the same from these measurements. The status mid-range is the cleanest. And from mid-bass is exactly the same, that from all these measurements that I've done with all these drivers, the status driver as a dedicated mid-bass is the most cleanest at the bottom end if you play it low, and it's all the way flat distortion up to 2K. So I would say the status is the cleanest. Again, I expected the difference to be slightly bigger. However, the biggest difference for the mid-bass is at the bottom end. Like the top end, this is SB17, and this is status. So the top end is very similar. The only difference, the biggest difference, is at the bottom end, that the status can play low, extremely low with no distortion. Even at 30 hertz, it has only 2.5% distortion. So from all this bunch, the status has the lowest distortion numbers, at least from what I'm testing. Yeah, and finally, let's have a look at the tweeters very quickly. So with the tweeters, it's a bit hit and miss because they're near field. I cannot really trust the frequency response measurements. So the only thing that we can have a look at is the distortion. What I have, where is it? I have that bad, really, really bad tweeter, the shitty one from the coax set. And again, I'm taking 80 dB measurement, and it has quite low distortion just because it has a crossover. It's crossed at like 3K, I think, and I cannot defeat that crossover. So I don't see what's happening at the lower end, but it has not bad distortion, like 1.6%, and it rises slightly at the top end. Yeah, for some reason, REW measures only up to 10K, but it's totally fine. And it's like this. I did measure SB29s, the ones that I have in my pillars at the moment. As you can see, I did play them down to 2K with no crossover applied. Again, so this bad crossover, it has a crossover applied, and it measures lower. SB29 doesn't have a crossover applied. If you cross it at like 3K or something, all of this is gonna go down very similarly to this one. But at the top end, it measures better compared to that coax. It's like 1.8. Now the DP tweeter is a metal dome, small, similar to this. SH is for shitty. Similar to this one, and again, it has high distortion compared to SB29. SB29 is good down to like 3K. All of this is, and it rises, and it's steady down to 2K. The DP is rising below 3K. So it probably would be a good idea to cross it 3 or 3.5K, not lower than that, because this, you would want it to go like that, buried. However, look at the third harmonic. So third harmonic on the DP tweeter, the metal dome tweeter, is rising together with the THD, but with SB29, the third harmonic is here, 0.1, and it doesn't rise at all. So that's the DP. Again, it rises up and it stays steady, a bit lower here. And the status tweeter
is like this. So this was a surprise for me as well, because this status tweeter is a ring radiator and the cone is carbon fiber, so it's not as light. The distortion here down to 4K is low. Let's compare it to SB29. Yeah, SB29 is a bit cleaner than this status, and SB29 plays all the way down to 2K and lower. The status, however, is rising down to 2.6, and then it drops off for some reason, and the third harmonic pops up here. So this tweeter, I would say it has to be crossed higher, maybe 3.5K, or even higher than that. But even if you cross it 3.5K with Linkage Riley, this is gonna be taken into account as well, and it's gonna start dropping probably. So this tweeter, you cannot cross it very low. I would say 3.5K with 24 Linkage Riley 24 dB. Compared to SB Acoustics plays down all the way down to 2K and even lower. So I did cross my these SB29s at 2K, and they play wonderfully. However, the status, it is clean above 4K, all the way there, cleaner than the DP, and very similar to the SB Acoustics. SB Acoustics is even more cleaner. So it just proves that SB Acoustics SB29 is an amazing, amazing tweeter. And the status tweeter is meh compared to others. So yeah, I will be crossing at something at 3.5K. Yeah. And these 90 dB is exactly the same, just in high. I didn't make any of these single frequency measurements for the tweeters because I ran out of time, to be honest. But yeah, so tweeter-wise, I think SB29 is a better tweeter than the status. However, this is just distortion. It's just pure theoretical. I haven't listened to them yet. I will be installing them in my car and I will be listening to them. But for now, it's only the distortion. And I think that's it. That wraps it up. We're kind of, half an hour in already. I will upload this REW file and I'm gonna link it into the video description. So if you want, download this file and you can check it out, because with the distortion, you have to jump between different measurements. I will upload it. If you want to check it out by yourself, you can do that. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.